listeners, and welcome to High Tea Mystique with your hosts, Kat.
And I'm Tess.
And Pam.
In a world changing faster than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea,
High Tea Mystique reminds you that no experience is too big or too small to teach us something about ourselves.
So join us for a cup of tea as we steep into adulting, womanhood, independence, and more. Does anybody remember what lullabies their parents / caretakers would sing to them?
my mom sang the lullaby one. Lullaby and good night.
Go to sleep, little Kathleen.
I don't know what she said.
Why
after
was
that,
she
though.
Russian?
I always think
Little Kathleen.
My mother.
Little Kathleen.
My mom.
My mom sang the Spanish ones, like Los Cochinitos.
What was that one?
I don't know. It was like, I don't remember the actual lyrics, but it starts with like, Los Cochinitos. Na na en la cama. Da na 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 na. Da na 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 na.
So cute.
And it's like basically the three little pigs.
Right?
Or like the little pigs. But then it goes like, uno soñaba que era rey. And it goes to the dreams of the little kids. And then the last kid dreams of like helping his mom.
Oh.
And then the other one,
No accident there.
something about like gallina. I don't remember.
Oh.
Yeah.
I also did the You Are My Sunshine.
Yes.
That was
I loved
a
that
big one.
thing. I
Mom would
loved.
do.
I said thing because I was thinking of a toy that my mom gave me for one of like her last Valentine's Day. It was like this little radio heart, and it just played that song over and over again. I killed that thing.
Like the You Are My Sunshine?
Yes, it was a little heart-shaped thing, and you pressed a button, and it sang the song to you.
Aww.
Killed that box.
We had a sunflower that did that.
Really?
Yeah. Don't
Cute.
know what happened to it.
You probably
idea.
killed it too.
Maybe.
I had
or
an
my great
annoying
uncle.
ass parrot.
Oh.
Like a parrot that spoke back to you that I think it was my grandpa's from when he had his karaoke in Peru. And then they just brought it over here.
Were you able to record it?
Yeah, like it copied your voice.
Oh wow. Yeah, no, that's end game right there.
Endgame.
And then I had a really annoying ass alarm clock. You know those like Lucky Cats or something
Yes.
like that, but it was an alarm clock that was so loud and obnoxious. And you're like, na 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 na, ding 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 ding. It was singing in Japanese, like just like
That's
to wake up
amazing.
and whatever. And like every time I'd go off, I hated and loved it at the same time.
You're reminding me of so many things now about like early 90s, 2000s. I had like a robot dog, but the dog was also a speaker.
Yes.
You
I
know what I'm talking about?
remember
And
that.
it walked because it was like your pet. What'd you say?
Poochie, but I don't think Poochie was a speaker.
No, doesn't sound familiar. I honestly feel like it was something like Robo Dog, like really, really
Mm.
basic name.
Yeah.
I don't know. To be continued.
Yeah.
You feel like you had it, Tess?
I
Sounds
had
familiar?
so
Gucci.
because you know how McDonald's does this thing where the big toys or the toys that are popular, they make McDonald's toy versions of that.
Mm.
I had the McDonald's toy version of what you're talking about right now.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
I think it is
So the
Poochie.
dog-
But McDonald's did come out with a Poochie.
Cuz wasn't it color coded, right?
They
Eye
had
dog.
different- Can I see
Yes.
a picture? Oh,
Yes.
I forgot about that one.
I
Yeah,
dog.
Look at Poochie.
Mhm.
Poochie.
I need to know that
P-
you guys know
Poochie,
what
like
I'm talking about.
P-O-O.
Poochie.
Okay.
Poochie.
Poochie, robot dog
I
toy.
wanted one so bad, and then like if you didn't take care of it, the dog would get mad at you,
That
and so I didn't play with it.
Wait, I probably had both. Yes. Yes.
Pam, you're talking about that one,
Let me see.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, she
This
is.
one.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, just her remembering the name, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
McDonald's
goodness.
McDonald's had a
Poochie.
a version of both though.
That's totally what it was.
Makes sense.
Because the McDonald's one
That
would
makes sense. that
play
McDonald's
music.
will
Really?
also have-
Yeah. They'd play music at you. It wouldn't speak, but
Wow,
or
the
it wasn't
nostalgia
speaker.
is real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Vintage Poochie. Sorry.
Oh God.
Is
we're
that, like-
vintage now?
yeah, it looks like a Sanrio character almost.
Yeah, it does.
Interesting.
That? Are you kidding? We'll show this to you
Yeah,
guys.
we need to
Send me the picture.
we
so I
need
can
to send
put
that to Pam so
Yeah,
she can plug
yeah.
that photo.
I'll send it right now.
right here.
Hello everyone. as we're being reminded as we go back in our own little capsules. Welcome back to another episode of High Tea Mystique. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening. Drive safely. I hope you're having fun folding laundry. We're here joining you. And today we have a special episode today. I think it's something that I can thank, my coworkers at work for bringing this up.
I see.
Yeah. It was definitely a special shout out to them because we had a very interesting conversation about arch nemesis. Scissors, plural. And I think this conversation really struck to me because I was like, we're not going to talk about our enemies, but because we have none. But,
Period.
exactly. But I felt it very interesting to kind of delve into some feelings that were coming about from me just reliving experiences from that conversation at work. And I was like, you know, this is probably something that I should pay a little bit more attention to. And that's what we're going to do today. But first, before we get into the gritty, we're going to start off with the nice, calm tea that Kat is going to tell us about. Take it away.
I would love to. Hey,
Thank you.
everybody. Hope
She's
you all are doing
back.
well. Yes, I am back. And there's Pam also on the mic. We're all here.
Pam.
We got the full house today. So today's tea is provided to us by Pam, and Pam did let us know that she got this tea on a trip. So this is from Orlando, right? Lake Buena Vista.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right from Disney Springs.
Disney Springs. So it's a loose leaf tea and it's called Calm Nights. And it's a delicious tea. We did already taste it prior to the episode because we couldn't help ourselves.
It smells really good.
Yeah, it's a full herbal blend. It's got peppermint, it has catnip, which is a new ingredient for us tonight. It also has some chamomile and lavender, and I believe that there's a little bit of ginger, and I do taste it too, that there's just a little more spice at the end. So this tea is excellent to aid us in our topic that we're going to be discussing. And the reason for that is this is a complete relaxant, right? So this is an excellent thing to take, not just at the end of the day, but also if you are under any anxiety or stress. Both peppermint and catnip have the same properties to reduce anxiety and stress. Catnip is also linked to reducing the effects of insomnia. So that being said, it's a little bit different from what we see in animals, right? Like we all know that catnip is a stimulant for cats, right? They ingest it or sniff it, and it causes them to like go into a hyperfixation. And there's like other things that have been said, that it's almost like a slight hallucinogen, right, for some cats who have a lower tolerance to it. But it's very different in humans. Really, it's something that just relaxes the body and the mind and removes and releases tension. And that is exactly why we are choosing to have this tea tonight, because it ties in really, really well with our topic.
Because we gonna get tense.
Mm-hmm.
Just kidding. Maybe. Not really. Anyway, so the inspiration for today's topic is something that actually, speaking out loud about this topic, about this idea with Kat and Pam, I've learned a little bit that, what I really wanted to focus on was anger. What happens, right, when anger comes into our lives? And Kat was actually, really helping me think about this topic because she even added on to the fact that, well, anger is a secondary emotion and usually comes from two primary emotions, which is fear and sadness. But to help us talk about this conversation, right? To help us talk about this topic, right, and have a conversation with each other, I wanted to provide some definitions just for us to marinate in, think about. So I'm going to read from my phone, and I'm going to start off with the definition of anger according to the American Psychology Association, APA.
Nice.
And they say that anger is an emotion characterized by antagonism towards someone or something, you feel has deliberately done you wrong. Anger can be a good thing. It can give you a way to express negative feelings, for example, or motivate you to find solutions to problems. But excessive anger can cause problems. Moving on to fear, we're going to go to the National Institute of Health, and their definition of fear is the combination of defensive responses, physiological, behavioral, and, perhaps in the case of humans, the conscious experience and interpretations of these responses that are stimulated by specific stimuli. And finally, the definition of sadness, according to APA. Sadness is a basic human emotion that's a normal response to upsetting, painful, or disappointing events. It's characterized by feelings of unhappiness, sorrow, or mournfulness, and can range in intensity from mild to extreme. Sadness is usually triggered by the loss of something highly valued, such as a relationship. Taking a deep breath. Exhale. Sorry, Mike. I did that right at you.
ASMR.
ASMR. Having heard those definitions, having maybe even some images pop up into our mind, let's start with our first question. And I'll ask the question, but I will definitely open it up to whoever wants to respond first. Does your anger come from more fear, or does it come from more sadness? Because as we said, right, anger is a secondary emotion, and it usually stems from one of the two primaries being fear or sadness. So what do we think, right? And of course, just answer from your own hearts, right, from your own experiences. Where does your anger come from more? Fear or sadness?
So I wanted to grab Tessa's phone really quickly just to repeat the distinctions between fear, or remind myself the distinctions between fear and sadness. And when I think about the times that I have been angry, um, and when I say angry, I mean like truly angry, right? Like incredibly upset, because I do recognize in myself that there are some situations where I'll instinctively feel frustrated and it's more of like a reaction. But it's not truly a full emotion that I'm feeling. And so in the times that I have been incredibly angry, I think it's more leaning towards sadness, right? It's that disappointment of being upset, of feeling let down, of feeling very hurt, by what's happened. And I think that a lot of the times when I felt anger as an emotion and not as a reaction, it's it's been very much hurt, right? It's something that's happened that truly hurt me. And the reason why I feel so angry is because I think that I am somebody who is fairly considerate of others, like that's why I love hosting. That's I love making sure that people feel comfortable, people are okay. And when when something happens where that kind of line gets crossed, or that kind of disappointment, like the action of a person or a series of events that usually stems from a lack of consideration from that party, I feel anger because I feel so hurt that this person or these people or whoever it is, because a lot of the times, like, I don't think I feel angry at events because those are a lot of the things that might be outside of my control. And so I kind of identify those as kind of reactions, like frustrations or things like that. But when I get angry, it's because people, whoever it is, they've just, it's like a huge disappointment. And it's to the point where, and I've talked about this in our very first episode in terms of lessons learned, right? The idea of my kindness being taken advantage of, you know? And that has shown up in my life. And those are the moments that when I look back and I think about it, I'm like, every single time that I've truly felt super upset to the point that I could label it as anger, it's because of that. It's because boundaries were not respected. It's because, as someone who puts in so much and considers so much, to think that someone, and sometimes this could manifest itself in family, in or in friends, and even in family, right? Um, and it's because of that. It's because how can you do this to me? How can you have this response towards me? How can you perform this action towards me, knowing the type of person that I am, right? Because then it's almost like the anger comes from them not respecting me and almost questioning my character, you know? And I know that I've felt a lot of this. I feel fairly evenly between family and friends. And I feel like family is one of those things where you have to kind of just learn to go with it and learn how to adapt with it because they're family. And then with friends, sometimes, you know, depending on the friend, there'll be times where you can kind of talk it out. There'll be times where sometimes it's just that difficult. But in all sides, I found, like, just even thinking about it, I find that a lot of the times when I feel pure anger, it's just that. It's disappointment. It's how could you, like, how can this line be crossed when I thought there was a mutual respect for said line for both of us, right? Like for either side, for your line, for me not crossing your line, and for you not crossing mine. And and I think it's also because in crossing that line, there's an intention behind it, and a huge thing that I really hate, like a huge characteristic that it's really hard for me to accept from people, is egotism. And so when you cross those boundaries, it's because you are considering yourself over potential damage that can happen to somebody else, right? And so if it's something that I feel, even if it's something that I've done, and I feel like if this person, and I think we've talked about it we have talked about it in the people pleasing episode, where if there are truly people who will understand me and will be a part of my life, family included, um, then they will understand. I don't expect them to accept it, but at least understand, right? Like, why am I reacting this way? Why am I getting so upset? And I can understand the same way for you. Like, if I've done something, let me know. We can talk about it, but it just has to be something where we have an understanding and we know. And then at that point, it becomes a different conversation, right? Um, but yeah, that's how I think it leads more towards sadness.
Yeah, and I think honestly, with your sources there, you're almost exactly aligning to the definition that we were given by the APA. Like, you are definitely understanding or connecting the emotion to actions deliberately done onto you,
Mm-hmm.
right? For lack of better or good, right? Or better or worse, sorry. I think it's I think it's interesting because something that, you know, anger definitely does to you is it can evolve and it can grow, right? And I know a lot of us, especially out there, are probably thinking that, sometimes with what you're describing, it's almost like the anger of, you know, to the point where you start crying. Like, this is that type of anger, right? Like, and this is something,
Absolutely.
right? Like, this is sometimes the only condition for some people to cry, like when they're so angry,
Yeah.
you know?
It's funny that you said that because that's like one of the things that frustrates me a little bit. Because when I get really angry and upset, no matter how hard, I don't want to cry. Because sometimes when you want to communicate something with somebody and then you start crying, they can take it in all the ways that is not the way that I'm intending it, right?
Right.
Because the tears are just coming out based of the fear, frustration, and the anger that I'm feeling, and that over, like, excess of emotion. But then they either won't take me seriously, or then they'll start shifting, and then, like, the topic will change and we won't address what's happening. Or I've even had the reaction of kind of shrugging me off, like, oh, like, why are you crying when we're talking about this?
Right.
So
Belittling it, almost like if someone starts crying.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I can't help it. But yeah.
Yeah. I definitely know strong group of females out there that, Pam included, are definitely um victims to that misunderstanding, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a fierce cry, like, and you feel it, because I feel like when you're looking at someone that does this cry, you're like, it's tightening every single muscle in their chest, in their eyes. Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful. Thank you, Pam.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Kat? Or any reactions to Pam first?
Yeah. No, I really identify with what Pam says about sadness. I think that it's very true, and what it got me thinking about for myself is like, oh, I think that I also resonate a lot with that. I feel a lot of anger rooted in sadness when I'm disappointed by people in my life. Um, the only thing that I would say with regards to fear is I think that a lot of the times when I'm angry and it's rooted in fear, it's more of what I'm doing for myself. I think that a lot of the times when I get angry at myself, it's because of the fact that I was probably afraid to like go a little bit further for something that I knew I could have, but I was afraid of what it would look like if I got it. Um and and then it will make me angry, later, because it's the all of those what ifs come in, and it's the what ifs that makes me realize that it was all out of fear. Because if the what if was there afterwards, it was also there before. It's also like a matter of maybe I didn't take the time for myself, and so all of those negative thoughts come in because I left a lot of space for them. But with regards to sadness, I might have had I think what's interesting in general with anger is what my heart gravitates towards, right? I think it's interesting that I also thought sadness initially, and I think it's because I might feel more affected by the things that people have done. Uh Not necessarily to me, because I understand that they didn't know that they were doing it most of the time. As opposed to the thoughts that I have in my own head. I think that's really interesting that I like innately think of what other people have done to me that makes me angry instead of the ways that I make myself angry. Because there's a lot of introspection, I think, that goes into if I were to identify with the first one, right? If I was just to think fear, because then it's like ultimately we bring up this topic because it's about unlearning. I think a lot of the topics that we discuss on our podcast are really about unlearning principles because of growing up and realizing that the way that you thought wasn't always right, in a way that is freeing and liberating. And so like talking about anger, we were already hesitant to bring this up, because it was like, how do we approach the topic? And all of us, I think, have our own reservations about like talking about something that just has a negative connotation. But at the end of the day, we're all human and we go through the full spectrum of emotions. And the angrier I get, the more higher my capacity to love at the same time, because it reminds me that I am capable to feel that deeply. And so I think that's why the idea of community comes first, right? And like why I think sadness first, because I give a lot of myself to my community and to my people. And I share a lot of my energy. And I would say that uh, I'm more of a listener, right? An active listener. I'm the type of person that you need to really ask me questions about myself to get to know me, because I don't just, spill the beans on the first
Mm-hmm.
encounter or anything like that. I'm not one to word vomit, at parties and stuff. And so when somebody gets into my circle, and then completely shocks with their character or just like in action, very similar to Pam, something that it's like I've made myself very clear as to the type of person that I am and the expectations that I have for the people in my community. So when you do something different, it does lead to anger because it's like I don't share myself with everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes me angry that you felt like you couldn't be who you are, but it also makes me sad because I recognize that like maybe the truth is that yes, you aren't necessarily what I am seeking in my life right now. But had you been like clear from the start, then we would have saved ourselves a lot of pain. And I think that that's kind of what relationships look like, like friendships that don't end up panning out. And like not the ones that it's just that like, oh, they were your coworker and then you didn't work with them anymore. Like the ones that were really, really intentional for maybe a good chunk of time, but you recognize that you weren't your full selves with each other. And so it ends up being anger, and then years later you can realize that it was a lot of sadness. But yeah, I just thought that was so interesting that like for myself as a check-in in the episode, that
Mm-hmm.
like, man, I don't look at my anger rooted in fear in the same way. It's almost like it's like if I were to put a hierarchy of what makes me angry, I blame others before I blame myself. you know it's a good check-in to do.
And you associated that with the anger stemming from fear more, like the anger in
Yeah, yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, because the question was like more from fear or more from sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, well, when you ask the question of more, right? Like it's a majority versus minority thing. And so I'm thinking, well, I think more of it would be coming from sadness. But then if you think about how I'm with myself all of the time and all of the things that I don't say, and all of the thoughts that creep into my head. And I agree with Pam that I think that like anger is different than frustration, and anger is different. I love what you said about how a lot of emotions you feel are just a reaction,
Mm-hmm.
whereas anger is something that's more deep seated.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And so that can discredit a lot of like the thoughts that go in your head on a daily basis, right? As things are coming to you. But when you really mull over things, which I have a tendency to do, being very over analytical, that's when that's when I start to realize that I have a lot more fear in those things that I say to myself.
Yeah, I think, and honestly, even something that came to my mind from hearing both of your responses, I'm not really sure if sadness and fear are completely separate from my anger, because I feel like something that I do is that the sadness from anger, well, no, I take it back. The anger from fear is more instantaneous, where I'm like, it goes from oh my god, what's happening, to oh my god, is this really happening? And then, anger. Anger from the fear, anger from, the fear of the situation, the fear of losing somebody, the fear of losing control. That's much more instantaneous. And it does involve me, right? Like I totally agree and I'm on that page, Kat, right? From your book. And I think something that's also interesting is that anger that, especially in my experiences, the sadness where it starts and then I become angry, it's because I'm really trying to get away from sadness. You know, I can feel it, that what I'm trying to do is convince myself not to be sad, and I'm angry at myself for also being sad, you know? And it's I feel very much the which I was actually sharing this with Pam before, like I sense always this kind of, whatever the interaction is with the third party person or the third party event or the third party thing, whatever it is, I relate a lot of my anger back to myself. You know? Like, oh my God, how did you end up here? Why are you feeling like this? Stop feeling like this. And I really, really 100% put it onto things that I've seen in my childhood, because I know these characters. I've seen their faces and I'm reliving the things that I saw as a child, and this is what they would do to like themselves and to other people. Like they would get mad at other people for being sad. They would get mad at other people for being afraid. And of course, because, people who don't know how to deal with emotions and don't have a lot of emotional intelligence, the easiest thing is to react with anger, right? And really pointless anger, not the anger that Pam is talking about, because that's real emotional intelligence anger. That's invested anger, deep, you know. But people, lots of people will take the easy route and just get angry to put on a buffer and not deal with the things that are the primaries: sadness, fear, right? And if I were to be super analytical, I would even say that my anger that comes from sadness ends and I never want to feel it again. I'm that type of people that like bookmarks, and I'm like, never talking to this person again, never coming back here again, right? I never want to find my my place here in this emotion, in the situation. Anger from fear, I will constantly come back to. Even if I don't want to, it's quite literally, I feel like very innate in my brain. I'm always afraid. It's like the anxiety, and the anxiety fuels like that kind of anger at myself too, where I'm like, I can't control these things. I know that this is so factual. Oh, why are you doing this to yourself? Anger, right? It's extremely two, like on two different spectrums, where it's like I feel like one is so clearly like, oh, never doing that to myself again, right? But then the other one is it's so cyclical, right? It'll feed itself and come back and come back.
Yeah, I think it's because like from my own experience, like it's such an interesting question, Tess. Like the difference between fear and sadness seems very uh when you take it surface level, it seems like a much easier choice to make. But I agree with the cyclical, because since it's something that you're manifesting, you've literally said the question of like, why are you feeling this way? So it's when you're your own because I would say we all try to be our own therapist in a way, right? Obviously, that's not enough. But in those moments when there's no one else or something you're not comfortable sharing, you try to do it to yourself. And sometimes we say the wrong things to ourselves, which is like really what it is more of a, you shouldn't feel this way. You should accept that feelings are natural and it's okay and you're doing your best. But instead, it comes out like, why are you angry? You shouldn't be angry. And then that just makes you angrier because you can't help the way that you feel. And I get it. Like absolutely same, because I think that we just as people have this like insatiable desire to be seen as perfect, even in front of the people who beg you to not be perfect around them. Like we just can't help it. We don't want to be a burden onto other people. And unfortunately, emotions like anger and sadness and fear and guilt and shame are like they're blacklisted, in society, and we can't be this person. Right? We feel like this person can't exist to anybody else, so we let them live in our heads a lot more. But it's so important to identify it, because the words are powerful, whether or not they're said.
Yeah, and storing that much excess is bad for you. Remember our definition here.
Yeah, and
A
I just want to echo what you said, Kat, that words are powerful, because that's something I've always believed in, right? And I know that it, like, when it comes to men, I've noticed that, or at least the conversations that I've had with some of the guys in my life, they won't get angry at words. They'll only get angry at actions, right? Like if somebody actually does something, but if they could talk all the shit in the world, they won't take it that. But then with us, right, with women, it's almost the opposite. And I think it's because it's true. Like words are just as powerful, if not more hurtful, because you're choosing those words, right? You're also choosing the action, but words can have such a huge hit. And so if you're the one saying that to yourself, who's going to be the one to stop that cycle and tell you, like, stop? You shouldn't be talking to yourself like this, because then it kind of spirals and spirals, and rage fuels itself, and then it becomes something where you just get so blindsided by it that you can't really see how the picture looks like anymore, how it looked like originally, because now it's all tainted red. So I think it's something that I'm glad that we're talking about it, and like even as we're talking about this, right? Like, just to give you guys some insight, before we were kind of thinking about the topic, fleshing out the episode, helping Tess flesh it out, and even as we're talking through it, some of the, like, even like how Kat was saying, like, this was a good check-in. And as I'm sure as the rest of the episode goes on, and one of the reasons why I love doing the podcast is because as much of preparation as we prepare for these topics, things just come up naturally in conversation. And I think this is such a relatable, important topic because of the fact that all the things that Tess was saying, that these emotions are not acknowledged, right? And especially in men, where it's like, you can't feel sad. You can only be angry. You can't be sad, because sad makes you less of a man, right? And so then it becomes, or even as a woman, you can't be sad, because then you're going to be seen as overly dramatic or whatever. And so you just have to always be happy on both ends. But that's not healthy, and we have these emotions for a reason. And so it's important to kind of give them the space that that is required for us to feel them. But then it's also important to remember to let it go, because if not, then you kind of stay in this cycle that Tess is talking about, right? And then at that point, who's going to pull you out of it?
I don't know.
Gotta be you.
Yeah, like if no one else knows.
Your world, your environment is your world. So if your
Mhm.
words are all of that negative words, especially towards yourself,
Mhm.
that's going to become your reality.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Working on it. Working on it. It's It is. It is quite, and it is quite that, right, Pam? Like, it's it's not only the words. It's not only um the feelings, it's the reality, right? Like, these things are very mental, are very abstract, but they appear in the physical world very, in ways that I think we take for granted a lot of the times, which begs the second question here, right? These emotions do appear very physically in the body, and we have to kind of slow down, which is hard when you're in the midst of those things, to kind of realize, like, what hurts, what aches, or even after the fact, when you're like done with the argument, like, there's pain in your body from this emotion, right? The amount of hormones that you just rush to your body because of this feeling, it's true, right? And I guess I want to ask to my friends here, you know, locate like that geolocation of anger in your body, where, or in that moment, right? Do you notice like a tenseness somewhere? Are you even noticing maybe pain, soreness days after? What does that look like for you guys? What does that feel like for you guys?
I'll start this one.
Yeah.
So the tea that we chose tonight was the Calm Nights, which, as I mentioned, has catnip and peppermint. And catnip is also a member of the mint family. So peppermint particularly is really, really great to aid with migraines and any like stress headaches, right? And that is absolutely where I feel tension in my body. It's my head. When I get angry, I like everything goes numb on the top of my head, like during the duration that it's in my mind. And so it can sometimes trigger down into my spine, like the first two vertebrae, like upper area. Um, and what I think is really interesting is like the more you linger on something, the more your body hurts. So like you can feel it just moving throughout the body because of our nervous system. Because as I just said, like it's in my head, goes into my spine. And so from my spine, like those first two vertebrae are connected to things that lead all the way down to my fingers and all the way down to my toes. And you'll just feel it. And the unfortunate thing is that once it's in the body, now it's an ailment. Like now what you have going on emotionally is now affecting you physically. and you need an actual like remedy and cure. It's not something that you can just cure just from, like lifting the emotional weight off. It's going to take like an actual recovery now. Um, and so I know this wasn't the question, but something that I do to help is I always have peppermint on me. And so I use Dr. Bronner's. I actually use a hand sanitizer spray because all of Dr. Bronner's has therapeutic grade essential oils inside because you can use it on your body as they did so soaps and things like that. And so I keep it on me. Every single one of person that I work with knows this because I constantly offer it because when you work in high stress environments, as I think literally everybody does, there's always things that come up at work that can be frustrating or just moments where you feel like you don't have a second to give to yourself. So I'll just do something like that, right? Because I recognize now as I get older that I can feel it in the day, that it's something like I'm so sensitive to my body and what is going on that I have associated it with a trigger now, and so I go to my peppermint when I feel that my body's feeling a little tense, and again, it usually happens at like a high stress moment of the day or end of the day, and just recognizing that I'm exerting a lot of something and I have a little bit too much in me, and I'll just use that as some type of reset. But those are definitely the areas, which is why I decided to use the peppermint.
I didn't know that about peppermint at all. Thank you, Kat.
Yeah, of course.
I will
Also
be
good for
buying
bad
Dr.
breath.
Bronner. Oh, yes.
Really?
Most people know about that one.
What?
What? She's a witch.
Green tea too. Like literally just green tea. I had a green tea toothpaste for a while.
That sounds yummy.
It's good. It's not as refreshing as peppermint, but it was good.
It was good.
You know, when we were talking about this, when Tess was revealing to me what the topic was going to be for this episode, immediately I felt tension, and I still do, which is why in this episode, I know I'm always cracking my neck, but if you see me doing a lot in this episode for you guys watching the video, it's because it all right here, right on the top of my shoulders, all the way down to potentially my shoulder blade, my neck. There are times, depending on how frustrated I am in terms of like the tears falling out, that I'll feel it in my temples. But definitely like from the jaw down, right? And even when Tess was asking the question, the first thing that I pictured was when you go to a yoga class and then the yoga instructor is trying to be funny but also intentional, and it's like, yeah, unclench that jaw. Like, have you realized how tense you're being? And then you're just like, oh my god, yeah. Like I hadn't realized that I was clenching my jaw, and those tiny little distinctions of no, like drop your shoulders, relax. And I think it's because when you're apprehensive, right? When you're feeling that anger, when you're in defense mode, the instinct is to kind of clench in and clench inwards. And so I think that's why a lot of the pain that I feel is there. And whenever I deal with anything that's stressful or like particularly enraging, that's where all of my pain goes. Um, and it's something that I think will take, like I feel like I know people in general have body aches, but I think that it's one of those pains that even if I think I went to go get a massage or something, it's not going to be gone in one massage. Like it's deep in there from the amount of times in my life that I've had those experiences where I've felt angry, and then it's just the tense because I don't have a practice like how Kat has with the peppermint of like, okay, how am I going to remedy this now to relax and make my shoulders relax? And a lot of the time is because, especially now, I'm so busy and stuff, but I at least do recognize that that does happen, and I feel it. This episode, this tension of like, that's why I've been drinking. I think my tea is almost empty, which almost never
Rare.
happens.
Yeah, very rare.
Oh, she
'Cause I'm
did
always
it.
so
This
busy
early?
talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pam almost never finishes her tea.
I know, it's almost gone.
Growth.
I also want to add on to what you were sharing, Pam, that a lot of the time when I'm angry and I'm like speaking on the anger in the moment. So like in a conversation with somebody or in perhaps what's the word? Digesting information with somebody, I'm not breathing.
Yeah.
I find that like a lot of the times I'll experience shortness of breath. And like even even when we started the podcast, which is something it's not rooted in anger, but it is rooted in fear. But
Mm-hmm.
like sharing something that is like right on the heart. And I think that when we're sharing our emotions out of anger, it's because we are sharing the rawest, most vulnerable thing that we know there's a lot of quote unquote risk in sharing. And so the breath just goes away. And then when we don't have breath, we don't have things like moving throughout our body. So that's what I think is interesting because we haven't really addressed that Tessa's question. Does acknowledge that no matter what in anger, there's tension.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a question of do you have tension? It's a question of where does it live?
Yeah. Even, I'm glad you mentioned the breath because even as through the podcast, I've been like bringing the mic away and just making sure I'm taking the deep breaths because I feel myself having shortness of breath.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not an easy thing.
Yeah, and actually, breath is doubly important because I I don't know how many times this has been reiterated to me, from my Hispanic grandmother spinning wives' tales to actual biology classes telling me that this is real things. When you don't breathe, you take away oxygen, right, from your brain, which lessens the functions of your brain. So you're actually um, pretty much making the worst possible decision when you're angry. And it's probably because you're not breathing.
Because you're not allowing your brain to function at its
Mm-hmm.
best.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. I have been told that so many times, various stages of my life. Um, Once again. And I think for me, which is funny because I feel like we're all talking about different body parts. Temples, migraines, your
Upper back,
upper back.
shoulders.
You even mentioned hips outside of this episode, but you
Oh,
have
yeah.
stored pain in your hips too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ooh. That's an interesting
I
chakra
Yeah.
position.
Yeah.
And for me, it's my chest and my jaw. My jaw will automatically I'll automatically move my chin to the left side of my body. And I'm like, that's me being angry. And uh, and I feel it building, like from whatever we're talking about, from whatever, and we universal we from whatever's happening in the moment. And I feel it really growing and moving from my jaw to my chest and like my shoulders, right? But it really starts in the chest because my chest tightens and it doesn't feel like it lets go for hours. Like I feel like something happened at work and not today, but figuratively, and my chest won't loosen until I get home. Like it'll say vacuum sealed, almost. And I'll breathe and I'll even feel a little bit of shortness just because of how tense the chest has become. Feels good to breathe.
Yeah. It's an interesting feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't we should do a series on this and like where emotions live in the body. And
Mm-hmm.
Tess already like manifested what she wants it to be themed off of because I could say that the area that you're talking about, I get that same feeling for a completely different emotion.
Is it sadness?
It's not. No,
Okay.
it's actually like love and community. Yeah, like
Oh.
I after big gatherings, especially after like my birthday and days like that where it's like centered around me and like an outpouring of love, I normally find myself like once everybody's gone and like all of the energy has just like whew, I get this overwhelming feeling in my chest like I'm going to explode. Like, but it's interesting, right? And it's I actually have fear when it's going on because I'm like, oh my god, am I okay?
Oh
Like,
no.
I literally feel like I'm about to explode, but it's like a radiant energy, like a huge light inside. But it's probably feels the same because it's actually terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like a same type of anxiety, but it's this anxiety of like, do I deserve all of the love that I just got? Like, It's crazy.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I know, I do. I
Let
am
me just
Back
say,
deserving.
at you when
But
let
those
me
it's
thoughts
just
that
come
say it
it's
into
out
your
that
head.
loud.
question,
Yes,
It's that
yes,
question of like it's all like a realization of like, oh my
yes.
God, like I give out, I actually get back what I give out, like one of
Mm-hmm.
those moments of experiencing it.
Yeah, yeah. And if you didn't catch it, Pam is catching me because I would do the same
Mm-hmm.
thing, right? So
Oh,
I'm trying
say
to
it.
help a sister out and
Ah.
verbalize it
These
outside.
Libras, man.
They
Yeah, you're right. We
crazy.
sell
They
ourselves short.
crazy. Hey, I've seen Leos do it to me too, and I have verbalized it for them. I'm like, yes, you do. You do deserve all this amazing love. Um,
Can I speak on the jaw?
absolutely, please.
So, uh, in my training, in studying theater, the jaw was like every single one of my professors in movement and in voice was obsessed with working on the jaw, with working on releasing the jaw, with talking about how in human society, we all experience a locked jaw, right? It's worse in others. However, it's all rooted to like as children being taught not to do things, like being taught right and wrong, right? It's our natural response, right? We hold our breath and we lock our jaw, right? Because we shut our mouth because we said something that wasn't right. And then that over time, right, results in a lot of tension in the jaw. And what I think is really interesting is that because I studied human emotion and like because uh, my degree would say that I'm certified and to be able to tap into the human emotion, we experienced a lot of in work uh, releases is what we would call them, right? So it's like in a workshop where we're going through just like a 90-minute session based around releasing what is in the body, right? Releasing any and all tension in the body and allowing it to come out in whatever way it comes out, which traditionally comes out in sobbing, right? Like uncontrollable sobbing is usually what a release looks like because it's something triggered to an emotional trauma of your past that manifests itself physically as it exits the body because as we already discussed, you can tackle something emotionally and it can still live in you physically because now you have two different things going on. And so the jaw was one of the most interesting releases to both experience and witness because it's not something that happens once and you're good.
No, yeah.
Like it's something that because it's been happening for so long, it's like you can do, I mean, we did it every single day in school, like exercises to continually release and unlock the jaw. And I probably I think I only had one release in college, and there were plenty of students that didn't, because it's an extremely difficult thing to do because it requires it's an emotional connection as well as a physical connection, and you have to be open and willing to go there, and I definitely think that it's rooted in anger because the root of it is as a child being told no.
That's interesting because I feel, well, one, what child made me fast forward into adult, but you're listening to your child self is like angry at being told no. You're like, I'm a full grown adult, but I still hate being told no. And we're more mature and we handle it better. But there's still like this very innate dislike. Like, anger.
I also feel like it's because you took longer to make your decision
Mm-hmm.
as an adult, so it's
Yeah.
like, what do you mean no? Like I have all of my T's crossed and my I's dotted.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I can be a little bit spontaneous too, but I still get mad when people say no. but there's definitely I guess it's like also anger from disappointment too, cuz it's like, man, come on. Don't deny me. You know? um it's definitely, well, and anger physically definitely leaves its traces, and even to what you're alluding to a little bit, I think it's like anger kind of works like a memory. Like sometimes it appears and you're like, this is seated in something, and you may not know it. And honestly, I didn't know why I get kind of peeved when there's a no and I get angry. I'm just like, oh, okay, well, it's just negative, so I think that's why I'm angry. But maybe sometimes it's again it's behaving like a memory. It's behaving like this is resurging because you're reliving something, subconsciously, right? That's also interesting.
So, one of the things that we've kind of talked about behind the scenes in terms of the podcast is the potential for episodes that revolve around a book. And I feel like this topic is the perfect entryway to that series because when Tess was mentioning this topic, the first thing that I thought in my head was I should have finished reading The Body Keeps the Score. And because that book is all about everything that we're talking about, right? Like how not just anger, but just traumatic events, how they manifest themselves in the body and how the body remembers, like the memory that gets stored in there. So I think that would be a great book for us to read. It's fairly quick. I don't think it's too complicated. I felt like when I was reading it was a pretty easy read. Um because I think this is so important because of the fact that, as we've mentioned, words get so easily dismissed, emotions get so easily dismissed. But now the experts are realizing, like, oh, emotional intelligence is actually a quality that we need and that we have to look for in leaders. And, you know, I think sometimes as women, those kinds of realizations, at least for me, can be a little bit offensive because we feel and we know how to feel, right? Um, but it feels really relieving and validating to see books, right? And see studies become more publicly known about the reality of things that seem so intangible, such as emotions and their effects on us, not just mentally, but physically as well. So that's my little vote for that book.
Got it.
Yes, let's do it. I would love that.
Put it
Mm-hmm.
under the score. I don't know what I was gonna say. I was gonna say scoreboard, but that doesn't make sense.
The
Put
body
it
keeps the
on
score.
the
That's why.
That's probably why. Put it on the table for
Table it, pin it.
consideration. Pin it. And actually, Kat was kind of getting into this next question a little bit. Well, we know that these are mental effects, physical effects. So let's talk about undoing them as best we can. How do we help our bodies heal when there is physical traces of anger in the body? What do we do? You were just talking about peppermint, right? Pam, do you have one?
I think that one of the best ways that I've noticed, no, I mean, I might not have applied it particularly for anger, but just one of the ways that I've realized that it helps me regulate and release just other emotions is yoga.
Mmm.
Because yoga is a practice that not only do you get to move your body, but the practice is made in such a way that you're moving your body but listening to it, right? Listening to it in ways that you have never paid attention or listened to it before, which is one of the reasons why one of the first few yoga classes that I took because of Tess, who introduced me to an amazing instructor, that I still miss her classes.
They
um
were free too.
yes.
Ooh, that's nice.
Is that awareness, right? Of your breath, of clenching your jaw, of are you like, shaking off? Are you holding tension on your shoulders? Drop it. And it's not even just telling you, like, hey, just relax, take a chill pill, right? It's actually describing how, like, and describing sometimes meticulously, right? Very accurately. What are the things you should be doing to help release that tension, to help release that stress? Because it's so easy to say, oh, yeah, just take a deep breath. It's like, no, take a deep breath, feel it. Like, again, words are powerful. Feel it filling up your lungs. Like, imagine it. One of my favorite things about yoga is when they say, imagine the breath moving to that body part. Wherever you feel pain, send your breath towards that. And it's amazing how much that mental practice really does just relieve a tension in terms of stretching. So imagine if it can do that, the wonders that it can do with anger. and releasing that tension from anger.
Worth also noting that we're still talking about breath.
Mm-hmm.
Just putting it out there.
Yeah, it connects everything.
What about you, Kat? Peppermint, check.
Yes, peppermint check. Definitely, definitely. I also realized I didn't mention how I use it. I spray it. It's a hand sanitizer spray. And I rub my palms together and I take a deep breath in, like forming like an enclosed circle.
Like a cup, you cup it
Exactly.
around
Yeah,
your
I
nose.
cup it around my nose and my mouth and I take a full breath in with my nose and my mouth. And yeah, it's amazing the effects. Um so what I also do is, you all know that I run, and something that I've really begun to adopt, it's not based in running, but it's in what happens between, because I recognize how important it is for really just everything. I think that there's like this fine line between the things that we do for our physical and our mental. And so, like, running is definitely something that I can say it's a part of my mental health. But because it's not just that, right? Like, I help lead a team, I lead a run club, right? So now it's like kind of a part of my career as well, in a way. And so it's hard to look at it as only for mental health. So I've started to remove myself from that, and there are new things that I fall in love with, and it's recovery. So just like Pam talking about yoga, which I assume was more of a restorative yoga,
Yes,
right? Like as
absolutely.
opposed to like more hot yoga,
Yeah, no.
because it does something different in the
Mm-hmm.
body. So for me, I would say it's my recovery, right? It's in my foam rolling practice, because it's in like the things that you do for yourself, where you give yourself space to check in on how you're doing. Because if I don't, then it won't happen. And like, it looks different every day, you know? Like, I definitely have grace on myself to honor what I need, but I will also say my body always tells me what I need. So like my body will let me know if I'm overdue, and I'm feeling that tension. And the unfortunate thing is, like, when it's not happening, the anger will come, because in the same way that the emotional can trigger the physical can also trigger the emotional. And so sometimes you have to remind yourself, like, I'm fine. I'm just having some tension right now. And I need to take a moment to release it. But yeah, for me, I would say foam rolling, and definitely sense and aromatherapy. And I also like to check in with nutrition, because I don't necessarily think that there's anything that's going to make me angry, but I do think that there are things that will make me more uplifted, right? Like antioxidants. Like loading myself up with antioxidants is going to help me, because I naturally feel tension in the brain. So giving anything to my brain that helps with cognitive function is going to like help me without me even needing to try anything. Like there's so much power in food. And so some berries, or I love my pomegranate juice, my beet juice, anything like that I can just quickly take without, because again, we don't always have the time, to be able to pump out that stretch. Or maybe sometimes you don't feel like you have the time, and that's valid too. And so just having a little toolbox, where you can kind of grab and go as you need it, is helpful.
Yeah, hmm, physical traces in my body. I think I am not a runner, but I'm a walker. I walk out. I walk it out. I walk out, especially when I feel like my anger is overcoming my breath. I'm not thinking. I'm just too succumbed by the secondary emotion, right? And I'm not even really thinking about the root of what's making me angry. And I'm just like, and I'm like, I need a walk. And that's the kind of timeout I put myself in. But it's also very physical, because it brings back the necessity. You need breath. I always like to drink water before a walk. You need to focus on, your endurance. You need to focus on your, how long have I been out here? Like it brings so much attention to just the necessity, and it takes you away from things for good or for worse, stemming from your head or your heart, and kind of basing yourself in real things, right? Like feeling the foam roller against your leg or your arms, or however, you're kind of stretching your body out. That brings you back to real terms, and that kind of brings back to some yoga fundamentals, I think, right? Where it's like unclench your jaw. Oh yeah, I'm unclenching my jaw. Stand up straight, like, pull the string up, right, and straighten your back. I loved that one. That one was always gave me a cute little visual to like sit up straight. Um, Much easier said than done, because I will admit that sometimes, and it always happens, that first, like, I guess, treatment that I try to give my body to like physically release the anger, I'm always like, let's stop thinking about this. Let's stop thinking about this. And I can't. Right? I'm just like, God, and I really do try to, I guess, stop it. But it is very difficult when we're talking about like physical responses, because almost sometimes, like, and this happened kind of recently when I was out on a walk, and it's very, very hot. My anger was just like, it just got more sizzly. And I feel like that's just the nature of the heat sometimes. It's why people say that there's more road rage over the summer. The heat will definitely trigger your anger, so watch out.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's definitely tough. I don't have a lot of good, I want to say, physical healings for my emotion, because I think that type of philosophy, that type of awareness recently came to my mind. Oh, it was recently brought to me, honestly, because I just thought that tightness in my chest, it just it's just there. I never even paid attention to it until maybe last year. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, this does happen every time like I get really angry or I get really sad. I should probably do something about that." Oh,
And that's on emotional intelligence.
yes.
Oh yeah.
Therapy. And I learned recently as well from, that, well, my therapist and my Google searches, eucalyptus. I will rub it on my chest. I actually, fun fact, also recently learned that vapor rub is made of eucalyptus, or has eucalyptus in it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's cooling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take my Vicks vapor rub and put it on my chest, so that I also, like, inhale it. It's going,
Do you put it here too, like on your upper lip?
when I'm sick, yes, but when I'm just angry, my chest.
To
Yeah.
help cool you off.
Yeah, honestly.
I was gonna say, as you guys were talking, the other thing that came into my head too is weightlifting. You know,
Ooh.
and that's like, what better pre-workout than anger fueling than rage fueling like your weightlifting. But then after that, it's almost like the muscles get tired, the tension is out. I think that's like, because yoga is such a good way just to pay attention to myself and give myself a moment to relax. But if I'm ever at a point where I'm just so angry and I can't get over it, I feel like weightlifting, like that kind of intense workout, really helps me, just like what you were mentioning before, right? To be able to forget it and just get over it.
The release. Yeah.
Yeah, high intensity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like anything, high intensity. And I think that's so valid, because I think that the one thing, what's the last question before I? Yeah, okay. So the one thing I think we can add on that
Spark
doesn't
notes.
tackle the next question is that honor it,
Uh-huh.
right? Like we honor our anger, because we know that nothing good comes from pretending that it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And like sometimes in honoring our anger, restorative yoga is not going to cut it.
Mm-hmm.
Like a little foam rolling session is not going to cut it, because I'm pissed, and I think that it's a yes, absolutely. Like weightlifting, going for a hard run, just doing something hard, going to the freaking axe throwing place, and throwing the axes where you
Those
get to
rage
destroy that
rooms.
shit. Yeah, exactly. Like I do it. Like do what you need, because also like in how we talked about, right, the initial approach that I made the connection that I think a lot of my anger from sadness comes from other people. Like when I'm going through something like that, right, it's usually because it's momentous in my life. It's going to be a little pivotal moment in my life, right? Massive. um I am, and ritual, right? Put a ritual into it. Do something that like when you finish it's going to make you feel very very human and very very alive and like very present uh with your being, because that's when change can occur, right? And ultimately like you need that change to ignite you out of being angry. Like you need to remind your body that you can feel another emotion, otherwise it'll stay stuck in that. So yeah, so good, so good. And like we did need to touch on that for sure, because as much as we want to balance out, I think we got into the mood with like things that calm and soothe, but at the same time sometimes you just gotta let that shit out.
Smash
Mm-hmm.
it. Clean out the closet. Enragingly.
Yes.
Yeah. And that goes for any emotion, honestly, because even when you were talking about those releases and sobbing, right? It's just, we're human.
It's violent.
Yeah, we're human. We have emotions. They can be very raw and unfiltered. And it's just about managing them and giving them a proper outlet so that you can kind of balance things out, because you can't stop yourself from feeling it, but you can help make sure you don't let it overcome you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And on that note, let's think about mental healing. We are human. It is going to happen. We can physically, take a step back, smash things, release, let it go. But the real healing, which is, what Pam was alluding to, is that, it won't happen in one deep massage, right? It needs work. So this last question is probably the most thoughtful one. How do you heal the traces of anger, in your mind, in your, in your emotions, in your mental capacities? Everyone's taking a deep breath.
Yeah, we
I
gotta
wasn't
think
breathing
about this one.
actually.
Oh
How
no.
about that?
Well, now we have to take a deep breath.
Yes.
I'm really trying to think about it. And you know, just to give you guys some additional insight, we kind of know some of the questions prior, but it's always still harder to think of an answer in the moment. Um, and it's like Tess said, right? It's an important question because it's very intentional, right? It's very mindful. And to get to the level where you're healing requires such a certain level of awareness, and also requires a certain level of resources for you to have to truly understand how to heal it. And I feel like just thinking about the very brief moment of how I've tried to heal some of that anger, I think the first step really is obviously acknowledge that it exists, right? This excess is existing for a reason. And then I try to understand it, whether that be by myself, whether that be reaching out to my community, my friends, and just getting their perspective on it. And then understanding what is everything that I need, right? Like, is this anger something that involves somebody else that I'm going to need their input as well? And then that's a whole layer of healing, right? That I would have to try to tackle. Um, but I think that as long as I develop an awareness and a sort of and develop like a management framework for my anger, I am already taking the steps to healing it, right? Because now I'm more aware of the next time that this happens, I know this is happening, and I now have, like we said earlier, the tools so that I can give myself the space that I need to be able to feel it, but I also know the steps I need to take to be able to recover it from it a lot more quickly so that it doesn't stay stuck in my body, so that I don't keep that tension in there. And even though it's not a very detailed or specific thing that we can just say, hey, just do this, right? Like, just take this pill, this vitamin or something. Um, it might look different for some people, right? So it might look different for some of you guys that are listening to us. We might even find out now it might look a little bit different amongst us three. But I think in terms of anger, I'm someone, I need to talk. Like I have to talk things out and just kind of get things out from out of my head, whether it be on paper or just vocally with somebody else, right? So if that means journaling, and I think when I'm in those extreme moments where I am super angry, I do lean to writing and towards journaling. And I, even though when I was younger, I didn't really keep a consistent diary. I had that diary when you were like a little girl and you're like, oh my God, this boy was so cute. But I didn't have, the typical daily diary of sometimes you see on in the movies and stuff of just girls writing about their day or whatever. And so when I do look at some of the journal entries that I have, um, and a lot of them were written in times where I was at this point, right? This pinnacle of emotion, anger, sadness, whatever it was, and I just had to write it out and let my thoughts free flow. And I think, especially when I write them out, because now they are on paper and it's tangible and I can read it back to myself, I've have had moments in the future, right? After that moment has passed, after I felt that emotion, after whatever happened with that person, with that event, whatever it is, I read back on those journals or those pages, and it's adds additional perspective for me, right? An additional awareness, like, oh, okay, this is what made me angry. Or even to what Tess was saying earlier, right? Wow, I was so angry. This is how horrible I was talking about myself, you know? And I think those moments have been really pivotal in helping me create some sort of healing response, right? To be able to handle those excesses. Um and now I know, right? Like, okay, I notice that I tend to get more angry or upset, obviously, because I'm have lack of sleep or something like that. And if it's something that I know that it's a quick fix, I could just easily adjust that, then I'm already on that path to healing, because then I'll better prepare myself so that I will have less instances of that, or less instances where sleep deprivation will be a trigger to my anger. And so journaling, and I think journaling in terms of anything, right? Anything that you want to do. I used to bullet journal a lot and I want to get back into it. And mood trackers is something that they have in those that's incorporated in that system if you want to, because bullet journaling can be very personalizable. And so those mood trackers, right? And even to what Caitlin was saying, if you're able to kind of study yourself in that way and you write down, what did I eat this day? How did I feel? There's patterns that you can notice and that people have used and then noticed even about their health outside of emotions, right? And they realize, okay, when I eat this food, I don't feel as good, or I don't feel whatever. I notice that I feel less happy when I haven't had enough water or anything like that. Or like I've noticed irritability, but look at my sleep schedule. Like I've said that I've only slept on those days that I felt this way, I had like 4 hours of sleep, right? So that kind of checking in with yourself and writing it down and meticulously in that way, I think has been helpful in helping me figure out my own way of putting that band-aid on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think honestly that's an interesting way to say that, you're still being attuned to the pain that happens in healing, because that's also surfacing in a physical way for you, you
Yeah.
know? So cyclical. Just saying.
I think it's also a great act of self love. I think that we spend a lot of time making our money, right, working in service of others. And I think it's really important on our healing journeys to be doing something like that, and so taking it uh, in that way, which is why I'm so admirable of people who do bullet journal. It just puts a lot of intention behind what you're doing, and it reminds you of your why every single time that you do it without having to ask yourself what your why is,
Mm-hmm.
because you've turned it into a ritual practice for yourself. I think that for myself, someone who doesn't bullet journal, it looks like accountability for sure, as Pam was also mentioning. And then I just thought of the concept of time, because accountability, absolutely. I think that uh, you need to have people who you feel safe with. Um, and you need to have people in your life who you can be 100% completely yourself with, and if you don't feel like you have that, please join our Discord server. Like, please DM us, please get into contact with us, because that's why we started the podcast. Like, we want to be there for you if you feel like you don't have that community. Uh because it really is my reason. Like, it really is what has helped me get over a lot of the things, because I talk to people and realize that I'm not crazy, that I'm not alone in how I feel. Some of the most radical and darkest thoughts that I've ever had, I have safety in knowing that someone else has felt them too. And I bet if I decided to share myself with a lot more people would know. But, I'm at a place in my life where I still do share those things with my be all end all, my very, very close friends. And so I would only recommend what I've done myself that I know works, and I don't know if sharing things with the entire world is necessarily the best route, but definitely sharing your process, and your recovery, because that is what it is. It's your journey to recovery, and it's not something that you should look at as a band-aid over who you are. It's a part of your life experience. It's your book of memories that make you you, and you're stronger because of it, because of going through this process. And so, like, just know that if there's somebody that you have on your heart that you want to reach out to, that you feel like is your vibe, maybe gets it, trust your gut. Right, our guts know what they're talking about, and our guts are a lot older than us too. All right, there's a lot of ancient wisdom inside of our gut. And that's why I also said time, because I think that nothing can be rushed, and while we can have like an ignition and a spark, into and out of places of pain and healing, I also think that it doesn't look like that most of the time. I think most of the time it's messy and it takes a long time, lifelong. I think
Mm-hmm.
that, as we already mentioned, like, it's impossible for tension to completely leave you. You're going to be checking in with it all of the time, because life is hard and things will constantly be coming at you, especially if you're in a process of growth. And so, to just let it be beside you. We've talked about this image before, that like the things that we go through are like it's our shadow work, right? So it's the shadow that's always going to be there beside me. So there's no use in running away from it and pretending that it's not there. It's a part of who you are, it's a part of your journey and your story. And the people who are for you will understand that, and their shadow may look the same.
Mm-hmm. There's some things that I want to echo about what you've said. Um, and the first one is this idea of how sharing can help, because even those darkest thoughts that you think you are the only person who's ever had them, you're not, right? And I think the way that society kinds of sets itself up, especially now with social media and so much access to the show of what is potentially these people's lives, um, it can be really isolating. There's not a lot of content out there that is raw and vulnerability because, you know, all the reasons, right? It's not marketable, whatever, not approachable, blah, blah,
It's
blah.
also not a part of the algorithm. So it
Yes,
might be out there, but we're not
right.
being exposed to it.
Exactly.
Mm-mm-mm.
And so, and I think, it's important to question, right? As our listeners, not only do we want to be there for you, but we also want to help build some of that tools in your toolbox so that eventually you can go out there, right? And then the community grows, and maybe there's someone that you can kind of help build their toolbox in, right? And so I want to encourage all of us to kind of question, like, why is the algorithm like that? Like, why does social media, why does the general normalized thing have to be that everybody has everything perfect, right? Or that everybody has this specific lifestyle. What is this trying to accomplish? And this all is a part of, building any kind of literacy, right? And in this case, this kind of emotional literacy in terms of what is the purpose of this. And when you kind of break it down in that way, you start making certain realizations about a lot of things, right? And one of those things is that it's really easy to control people when they feel isolated, and it's harder, and it might feel less of a priority to for people to build togetherness within people, because that's where people start making these realizations, right? And then revolutions start happening and people start questioning, is as a group, why not? And when whoever's at the top cannot give them a legitimate answer, it's not one person that they're dealing with, it's with a whole group, which is much harder. And so that's why I encourage all of you to question that, um, just for your own self awareness, right? And just for you guys to kind of feel more confident about whatever might come at you in this world. And the other thing that I also want to highlight is this idea of sharing too much with everybody, because that is something that I used to do, right? We've mentioned on this podcast before that, well, I've mentioned, and then Kat has mentioned, we've mentioned that we've gone through depression. And that was one of my, I guess, responses to thinking that that's what was gonna help make me not sad, right? Not depressed. Was just telling everybody and seeing who cared, or kind of like telling everybody in a way to prove to myself, like, you see, nobody cares. Nobody cares about you, right? But the problem is, not everybody has the capacity to handle what you might be telling them. And not everybody might be close enough to you to feel that they can give off some of their energy and some part of themselves to help you. And that's valid on their part, but it doesn't make you invalid, if that makes sense, right? Because as easy as that choice may be to say, oh, I'm going to tell everybody, but you see, nobody understands me, or nobody gets it, or nobody wants to help me. The reality is not that. It's just that you're not going to the right people, and then you start exhausting yourself and potentially go down a worse path. So I think discernment is very key, and it's something that we've talked about a lot, that comes up in different topics. So, yes, talk about it, but be intentional about who you're saying it to, because you don't know who that person is. And if, let's say, it's some random person, they could come back at some point in your life and that information is used against you. And so discernment is so critical. Discernment in, right? Why do I feel so alone? Why is everything being shown to me in this way? Discernment in, should I be telling these people, or this person, this part of me? Because when you're sharing it, like something as deep as emotions, it's a level of vulnerability. It's a part of you that you are taking out and you're giving to that person, and it's a trust, right? People have to earn the right to be able to handle those parts of you. You can't just be giving it out to people. And it's one of the reasons why I want to say it is because I've seen it in a few friends of mine. Um, and it's led to them kind of, taking the darker path and leaning more towards the shadow self. And so it's just something that I kind of want to, if I can, right? Whoever's listening, um, maybe help you out, right? Just, we're here. We've made this podcast for that purpose and with that intention, but just make sure that you also are being intentional in terms of who you're sharing that information with. And then the last thing that I wanted to highlight that you said is this idea of shadow work, right? Um, Duality is something that is just innate in humanity, in nature. It's part of the reason why it's the cycle of life, right? And it's even why in tarot, like, the death card comes up and the world card comes up. It's because it's a cyclical thing. And so ignoring it, that shadow side, and not confronting it is only going to make it worse. And the shadow is there for a reason. That's where your growth happens. That's where you start realizing that this shadow is a partner, and it's highlighting some of the things that you have to deal with. And if you're not choosing to deal with that, then it's only going to get harder for you, So lean into it to understand it and try to question it, like why, what, not in the time, not question, don't question it in the way that Tess was questioning herself earlier, right, in terms of bringing herself down. Question it in a way that's curious, right? Where is this going to lead me? Where is this trying to lead me? Because at the end of the day, your body fights for itself. It does everything that it can to make you function at the most optimal as you can be, right? So that's why things like that we've mentioned earlier, nutrition is important, movement is important, releasing and acknowledging of these emotions are important, because it's what you need to help keep your body in a state that it'll keep you alive, that it'll keep you functioning, that'll allow you to live whatever life that it is that you choose. So just those things.
I'm going to bring it to a close. And I am going to highlight the fact that, listen here, okay? Looking at the camera right now and speaking to you all directly. The traces of anger means it's still in your body, it's coming up in your mind, it hasn't left you yet. Remember, above all else, this is something you can control. To believe that it is out of your control is quite simply not true. Emotions can be observed. Take a step back and remind yourself that this anger that you're resurging in your mind is not happening to you. Nothing is happening to you. Your mind played a trick on you. Your mind brought something to the surface, and you're reliving something. You're feeling something all over again. And just as your brain brought it up, you can take it out from your realm of, rawness and anger, and you can separate it and almost imagine it as pinning it in front of you and looking at it, feeling it, analyzing it, and then asking yourself, will this serve me, or is this going to hurt me? That's been the basis of a lot of my mental work. For many emotions, anger included, anxiety, self-deprecation, insecurities, fears, galore. Your mind will bring all of them up because it has to do something. The brain is neurologically designed to keep going. So these things probably aren't even conscious decisions of yours. So don't treat them as you torturing yourself. Don't treat them as anything else but coincidences or controlled, right, observations. Especially, with the facts still being true. Nothing is happening to you. You are safe, right? You're just thinking of a memory, and a strong emotion came from that memory, but that's all it is. Observe it, feel it, but remember, you can control it. And the most important thing for you is to decide, has this served you? Has this brought you to a point to get better or to get worse? Has it failed you before? This is probably a good premise to decide when it needs to stop, right? And that has been the most helpful mental tool when I feel emotions like this, especially, with an anxious mind that will want to produce things times 10 just to avoid negative things, which ironically means bringing up negative things. And remember, the only reason why we're doing this to ourselves is because we are serving ourselves. And we're not trying to focus on, like what Pam was mentioning, that we are just the source of our problems. We are just bringing the emotions and we are the problem. We are the problem. No, we are training ourselves, right? Our mental healings to feel the difference between, really controlling the emotion, using it as a tool versus, okay, it's just coming up because I thought of this and I can actually separate myself a little bit more and look at it a little bit more objectively. Two really good benchmarks, right? Using anger as a tool, which our definition had referred to. And I don't know how many times I've referred to it because I agree. And it's been brought up in my life several times. Anger is a tool, but first you really have to understand it, right? Because then it's the most powerful, card in your bank. You understand things, you can protect yourself from things because that anger just fueled that knowledge to say, and I've set a boundary, right? And I'm going to be protecting myself from now on. Let the traces of anger turn into fuel to be proactive. And that I can say is for sure a mental journey.
Can I see your phone real quick?
Oh, sure. I was like, what hand motion is that?
So
It looked like playing on the GameCube.
I just want to look up the name, because as you were talking, this will be the second time I quote Bluey. As Bluey's mom said, hold on.
Amazing.
Bluey.
So sorry.
You're okay.
So I think Bluey is such an amazing show. I'm so glad that it's here. And as Bluey's mom said to Bingo, you're not a cheeky person. You were just being cheeky, right? You are not that angry person. You just had this emotion, anger. And I think a great way to kind of visualize what Tess said, outside of the movie Inside Out, because I think they also do a great job of doing that.
I love that movie.
There's an episode of Bluey called Bingo's Bad Mood. And what happens in that episode is that the actual daughter, Bingo, is really upset. She's throwing a tantrum. And so the parents have a game where the dad is a physical manifestation of her bad mood and so controls her, right? Like she'll stand on his feet and he'll grab his arms. And so it's like she starts doing bad things, right? And then she starts laughing and the mom is like, "Oh my god, what's happening? Why are you doing all these things?" And Bluey also knows the game. And so she's also saying, "Oh no, Bingo's in a bad mood." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And so the dad is controlling Bingo, right? And it's her bad mood that's controlling her and making her do these things. And then they're trying to figure out a way to take her out of the bad mood. And it's a game, but I think it's such a great visualization and a way to kind of think about it's not you, it's a part of you, and you can remove yourself from it, right? Like you can handle it, you can manage it, like how Tess was saying. um just take like that separation, right? And that it doesn't become you. So if you haven't watched it, I would highly recommend Bingo's Bad Mood. um and just the show Bluey in general. It's great. Thank you.
I like how the dad is dressed as a Viking.
Yep, that's
To
the bad
commemorate
mood.
his bad mood. It's a Viking hat. That's so funny. By the way, that tool brought to you by therapy. Just saying, we're talking about finding the right people to talk to. Definitely invest. Just try it out. I'm so thankful for my therapist. Bless up. And now, sorry, I was just looking at Pam like, yes, next. And now,
For the show.
our last segment, which you all will know and I'm going to do now, is handed over to Pam to help us find some more, shall I say, guidance? Shall I say energy? from her very own tarot reading. And she has a very special deck with her today, and I'm very excited for her to talk about it.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because throughout this whole episode, right, we were mentioning earlier, we were feeling tense currently. We were feeling shortness of breath. And now that we're towards the end, I feel my shoulders dropping. I see Kat like yawning. I've been yawning.
I'm
Like
so
the,
relaxed
the,
now.
the calm nights have definitely taken its effect. And now that it's almost over, I feel that relaxation of like, oh, I can breathe, and my shoulder doesn't hurt as much. And I think um this deck came at the most perfect moment. The deck that I'm using today is called Wisdom of Pooh Tarot. Yes, Pooh as in Winnie the Pooh. And this is a deck. I can't remember exactly how it came across, if it was either Instagram or Kickstarter. But I saw it and I knew immediately that I had to have it because I love Winnie the Pooh. That is one of the nostalgic shows that brings me so much warmth and comfort. And the deck itself comes with a blessing, right? And I think that's so beautiful and powerful. And just the idea that Winnie the Pooh is such a show that, and I feel like maybe one of the first few shows as we were young, but we maybe didn't realize it, that kind of handled those things, right? Like Eeyore, how he's always sad and depressed, but they still kind of include him in all of that. And it's very slow, and the colors are very calming. And I think it's the perfect deck to use for today, because of the fact that I feel like Winnie the Pooh just helps us simplify things, right? And see them as not as serious, not as a big of a deal. And sometimes that's what we need. And, throughout this episode, we've talked a lot about anger and the physical body. We've given some insight towards that. But I think a lot of the times when you do get angry, or a step to, if you feel that you want to get to that point where you want to heal, where you want to be better, or manage your anger better, it can be a little bit difficult to kind of snap yourself out, right, from when you're in the heat of the emotion, and remind yourself of what it is that you need to do and dig into those toolboxes. So I feel that I want to ask the cards, right? When we feel those moments where we feel so raw in that emotion, like what's something that can help us either get out of that, right? Or at least help us limit the amount of space that it's giving, to the point that it becomes a little bit detrimental. So we just give it all the time that it needs and nothing more, but also nothing less. Because when we're in that heat of the moment, emotions are emotions. They can easily take over. So if there's anything in terms of what can help us with that, right? Like what can help us as we're in the heat of the moment, take that moment to step back. So we have, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we have the Four of Wands and the Three of Pentacles. So let me just pull up the little card sheet that they have here. So for Four of Wands, it says optimistic, secure, triumphant. And in this deck, it shows Christopher Robin in the middle. It almost looks like a midsummer sort of celebration. There's four wands. There's a vine with all of these fruits. Pooh is on the bottom with some flowers. All of the characters are kind of dancing around, spinning around Christopher Robin. And then for the Three of Pentacles, we have some keywords in this deck is accolades, actualization, proficiency. And we in the image, it shows like a little market. Um there's rabbits, and there's Pooh and Piglet. Pooh is looking at a tomato, and there's also the tree of life that's engraved in Rabbit's little fruit stand. And then at the bottom of the deck, we have the Emperor. And in this depiction, it's Christopher Robin between two trees, and he's fishing. And he has a fish. He caught a fish in the line because the fishing pole's a little bent, and then Pooh is just right around the corner, checking to see what Christopher Robin is doing. And in this deck, some of the keywords for the Emperor is pragmatic, stable provider. So one of the things that I immediately thought about when I saw the Four of Wands and the Three of Pentacles is this idea of community. And before we were talking about how emotions can easily overtake you, right? And one of the things that I immediately thought about in terms of Christopher Robin is how he might feel like he can't move, right? And all of these people are kind of bringing these ropes around him and tangling him a little bit, right? But if you really look at the depiction, they're having a celebration, right? They're having it might be a dance, it might be a game, um but it's not anything that's truly detrimental to him, right? So I think that, and again, Christopher Robin is here with his closest friends, right? All of his friends from the Hundred Acre Woods. So I think it's like what we've mentioned before. Maybe if you have a friend, right, that you trust, and you're starting to realize and gain some awareness, right? Maybe you can ask them, hey, do you mind helping me, like, you know, do X, Y, or Z? Something simple. It could be a reminder, a gentle reminder, maybe like a little tap on it, whatever it is. But I think leaning to community and asking them, and the right community, right? Because all of these people, they're here, well, people, all of these characters are here, and Winnie the Pooh has flowers. Kanga has flowers. They're all here in support of Christopher Robin, and he might feel like he's tangled up, but at the end of the day, he sees that his friends are there, and the rope. I mean, I don't know if the artist had a or the person who made this deck had a particular vision for it, but when I saw it, because it's in red, I immediately thought of like the red thread of fate, right? And so that's why it's so important to really discern who you're talking to, because and to really pay attention to who's in your life and who's really paying attention to you, because those people were brought into your life for a reason, right? They were meant to be there at that specific time, and maybe it's so that they can help you understand and heal through this, because as much as we want to say as humans, because a lot of signs of success is accomplishments on your own, right? Is singular accomplishments, individual accomplishments, especially in the West. Um, there is so much more. Like, there's no way that you can get there without the support of your community. I don't care who you are, I don't care who you think you are, but nobody can get to where they're at without the people around them supporting them. And so I think because of also the keywords that come up, right? Optimistic, secure. That word to me, in order for you to be optimistic and triumphant, I think first and foremost, you have to feel like you're secure, like you're safe. And so once you find those safe people, lean into that, right? Don't be scared. And this also kind of reminds me of the pleasing episode that we just had. Don't be scared to ask. Don't be scared to ask for that help, because they're there for a reason. And it's not like they're there rolling their eyes. They have a bouquet of flowers there for you, so they're more than willing. You just have to make sure you're asking the right person. Like we said earlier, don't go around telling everybody, the select few. And then I think the cards are really encouraging the sense of community, and also just the sense of things will be okay, but it'll take their time, because the Three of Pentacles um is like, the keywords that are here are accolades, actualization, proficiency. for all of that to come up, right? It takes practice. It's a journey to get there. So for you to get to this point where you're feeling like you are bleh, actualizing
There we go.
actualizing your healing, right? And actualizing all of these efforts to manage your anger, it's going to take its time. And I don't want to discourage you and tell you that it's going to take forever, because it's the 3 of Pentacles that showed up, right? It wasn't any other pentacle. It's pentacle energy, so it's still going to be slow moving energy. But it's not so far into the minor arcana, right? It's step number 3. And so you still need to go through steps 1 and 2, but it doesn't mean it's not there. And then you'll eventually get there, but it's going to take some time. One of the reasons that I say that it feels like the emphasis here is community is because this is a market, but the only people here in the 100 Acre Woods are Rabbit's friends. So Rabbit's friends are the ones that are going to be supporting Rabbit and going to Rabbit's stand and buying the vegetables and supporting, in this story, his business, right? And so don't undervalue the idea of community, because it can be a really powerful tool. And whether that manifests itself in friends or a therapist, or, whether it manifests itself in spirituality, in religion, whatever that may be, community has many shapes and forms, whether it be hobbies, right? Um, but it's important. It's important to remember that you're not alone, that people are here and there are people in your lives, no matter the situation that you're in. There's always going to be at least one person that will fight for you, that will advocate for you, that will believe in you. If you don't have anyone at that time, maybe the first step is to choose yourself to be that person, and then all these other people will come in along the way. Um, but peop- the certain people in your life at this moment are there for a reason, right? I truly believe I'm somebody who thinks that everything happens for a reason, and people come into our lives for a particular reason, whether it be to teach us a lesson or just to give us a few moments of our lives, and then that's it, and then we're grateful for it. But they're there for a purpose. And so look into that, right? Explore that. Excuse me. And then I think it's encouraging because at the bottom of the deck we have the Chariot. I'm sorry, the Emperor, and then behind that the Chariot. So it's this idea that with the keywords here: pragmatic, stable, provider. You're gonna get there. You're gonna get to that stability. You're gonna get to the place where you can handle it on your own, right? Christopher Robin is here. He's fishing. He has a whole bucket of fish. He's got it. He knows how to do it. He knows how to reel in that fish. Pooh's there on the sidelines, like, yeah, go, Christopher Robin. But he's got it. He knows what he has to do. He has his fishing hat on. And I think it's so appropriate that the card behind it is the Chariot, because that's all about action and that's all about movement. And so it's encouraging that you are going to get there. And the Emperor card, I am reminded by the Aries sign on Christopher Robin's shirt. The Emperor is the Aries card, right? And the Aries energy is all about doing, action. Their verb is I do. And so once you get into that headspace, right? And I think it's important to also try to push yourself to get into that headspace of I can do this, right? Start transforming your perspective, because again, with the 4 of Wands, it's all about perspective. You could either see this as Christopher Robin and his friends trying to tie him up, maybe leave him out for for prey or something, or they're
No,
playing a game with him,
that's not
right?
it.
It's all about how you're looking at it. And the way that you see it is going to affect how other things happen. So if you're always constantly there and you're fishing and you're like, oh, I'm never going to get a fish, and you're constantly reeling it in and reeling it in, and you're like, see, I didn't get any fish. No, it takes its time. Cast your line out, try to see where the fish are nibbling, and then you start getting the hang of it, right? Like you practice those muscles. And once you learn how to do it, it becomes even the healing, right? It becomes muscle memory. So if you're in that heat of the moment and you're thinking, "Oh my God, like how can I ever break that?" If you're at that point where you're reflecting and you're realizing, "Whoa, I was super angry. How can I ever break myself from that?" You know, encourage yourself that maybe with lesser levels of anger, I can acknowledge it and stop myself. So let me practice with those steps, and then it'll start evolving and evolving and evolving. Because as the phrase is, you know, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man a fish, he'll eat forever. And so, teach yourself, right? It's gonna be a journey, but you are gonna get there. And the more that you practice, and the more that you speak to yourself in the ways that you want, in the ways that you want to change, it's gonna start transforming into your reality, and it'll help you once you get into those moments of peak emotion to be like, hold on, because now you've been able to do it at lower levels to the point where the upper level may not feel as intense, right? Because you've been able to manage now a lesser level of angry, and so you might be more in tune with yourself and with your body to realize, oh, I am super angry right now, but I feel like I know what it is that I have to do, you know? So it's fairly short, this episode, but I feel like that's the message that they wanted. That the poo insights, of you, when you think of Winnie the Pooh, he loves Christopher Robin. He's just there, he's waiting, but he's still living his life, and he just wants the best for Christopher Robin. So if you maybe are at a point in your life where you don't have that poo or those group of friends that are in the 100 Acre Woods, maybe it's time to take a look at your friend group, right? And try to start finding people who will support you in the ways that Pooh supports Robin, or Christopher rather, and helps him prepare for school.
Skull.
Skull.
I love that movie. Skull.
Skull.
Christopher Robin's first day at Skull.
I gotta watch it again.
Yeah, movie night.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah, that was a great read, Pam.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pooh Bear.
Thank you, Pooh Bear.
Silly old bear.
Thank you, Kat, for joining and having this conversation, for trusting in me when I brought it up, because I know it was a hard ball to sell, this topic, this conversation. And I think you both joined in and really not only brought it to life, but also helped with this, strain of thought, so that we were not just here and, having a conversation that, for lack of a better word, just causes more tension and actually gets us to progress and gets us to continue the good habits of, whether it be, helpful for us and it translates well, or you're like, maybe that might not work for me, but I'm going to try something else. That's the whole point. Whereas we are human, we all experience these emotions, and because we are human, we can all find a way through them together, quite simply.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you to my hosts, to my friends, for talking about it with me. And thank you, listener, for being our friend. And
our Godsibs.
And our Godsibs. Until next time, from High Tea Mystique, have a great day. Have a great evening. Good job on folding laundry. I hope you made it to work okay. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.